necessary. All right. Well, it is 12, so I'm going to ask everyone to mute. And I am going to go ahead and introduce our speaker, Barb Britton. I have had the joy and pleasure of knowing Barb for, I'm not sure how many years now, maybe
quite
10,
a few,
7, 10 years, something like that. We I think both of our debuts were published with Pelican Book Group, and that is really how we got to know each other and have become friends and have supported each other in our writing journeys. So Barb is coming to us from Southeast Wisconsin, and she writes biblical fiction and contemporary fiction. Her story, Whispering Creek, has a kind of, I don't know if it really parallels her own journey, but Barb is a breast cancer survivor, and she touches on that in that story, and it's just really wonderful. If you haven't read Barb, I highly encourage you to do that. She's a beautiful writer, and her biblical stories usually find characters that aren't really well known and brings their stories to life. And then sometimes I'll be listening to the Bible Year Plan, and they talk about the sisters. You're going to have
the daughters of Zelophehad.
Thank you. I was going to mess that up. Yes. And they'll mention them in the story and how they go before Moses. And I'm like, great. And it's really cool. So anyway, I encourage you to check that out. And so I'm going to turn it over to Barb, and she's going to speak to us about how to prove to the IRS you are a writer. And I'm going to remember to mute myself too.
Well, thank you, Kelly. And thank you all for being here, because talking about the IRS and money and may not sound that exciting. So I appreciate you being here with me. And I'm not a CPA. That's why I hire one to do my taxes. And I listen to him, and we'll talk a little bit about that as I talk about my journey into taking off expenses as a writing business. I'm not a lawyer, but my son just became a lawyer. And I know the importance of court case precedents, legal precedents. And so we're going to be looking at a court case today that came down in 2016 that specifically talks about hobby versus business, and it's writing related. So it's nice to know what the IRS is actually looking for. So before I get into a PowerPoint, I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey. I did not know I was going to become a writer or an author. I was a chapel teacher for kids, and I was writing my chapel lessons, and I prayed for creativity. I wrote a book with this idea that was in my head. It took me a little over a year, and it was like January of 2009 when I finished this manuscript. But I had no idea if it was any good. I had no idea about how to get it published or anything about the publishing world. And this was 2009, before the internet, before blogs and all these Zoom and virtual conferences. There was very little information out there for writers. The gatekeepers were keeping it pretty locked down. So what was I going to do? There was a Saturday 3-hour workshop by an author at a local university that I went to. And she gave me 2 pieces of advice that really was golden. And we'll talk about that later on. But she said, you know, you need to join a professional writing group. Now, I was a Christian, but I had no idea there was a Christian publishing world. In fact, the first couple of books I wrote were just what you call sweet stories. So I joined RWA, Romance Writers of America. I got involved in Wisconsin Romance Writers of America. And that's where I cut my writing teeth. And as Cynthia talked about earlier, that local group of Wisconsin romance writers, that was my tribe that came around me and walked with me through my writing journey. This author also said that I needed to go to a writing conference. So in March of 2009, I still have the handout. It was the 10th anniversary of the Writers Institute at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So I went, and I realized how much I needed to learn about this business. But I was able to network and start building a network of authors and start learning if my writing was any good and what I needed to do to eventually get it published. So lo and behold, in the mail comes the magazine from Romance Writers of America, and there's an article about taking off your writing expenses as a business. So I went to my CPA and I said, hey, I'd like to take my expenses off. And he said, you know what? I don't feel comfortable doing this. And I listened. 2 years later, I went back to him and I said, I'd like to take my expenses off. And he said, now I feel comfortable. So we're going to talk about what I was doing that made him feel comfortable that I was a writing business. So I'm going to go here and see if I can get my screen to share. Okay, here we go. How to prove to the IRS that you are a writer and a writing business. So that's what we're going to go over today. So what did my CPA see that said to him, she is a serious writer? This is a business. Number one, he was looking for my involvement in professional organizations, because this not only was giving me the craft side of writing, it was giving me the business side of writing. I was networking with professionals in the business. And these were the people, I still am friends with them today because I joined in 2009. These are the people that show up for me when I have book launches, when I need endorsements, if I need encouragements or critiques. These are the people that are there with me that know our lingo, that can support me in the industry. And I can say that I am a professional. At the time, I belonged to Romance Writers of America and their local group, Wisconsin Romance Writers. Because my first book was YA, I also belonged to the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, SCBWI. So I had two professional organizations that I was maneuvering in as a professional. And I recommend anybody who's pre-published, even published, to really get involved in professional organizations. Take on a board position. I took on a board position as secretary. I was helping with conferences. I was helping coordinate contests. I was not just a name on a roster. I was showing up and actually getting involved in these organizations. The other thing was that other piece of advice the author had given me initially. I was getting out of my home and having to drive and attend writing conferences, workshops. I had to learn the craft of writing, goal, motivation, conflict, show, don't tell. What is a genre? What is a word count associated with a genre? I had to learn all that information. Fortunately, I'm near Milwaukee, Chicago, Minneapolis, Madison, and there were workshops being put on by Michael Haig and Donald Moss. I would go to those workshops. I was serious. And I was going to about 2 or 3 conferences a year. And that was the time when I physically had to show up. This is great now that we have Zoom and virtual conferences, but I had to actually leave my home and rub elbows with other authors. And that actually I enjoy. And I built a lot of friendships, but I was learning and taking all these workshops, webinars, conferences, like you're doing today. So pat yourself on the back. Also, by this time, I was submitting my work to agents. Now, I was in what we'd call general market. I was sending out query letters to agents, and I was keeping track of who I submitted to and their response, and I would keep track of the responses. And by the time that my CPA was comfortable with me, I had finished book 2, so I had submitted book 1 quite a bit. I think between those first 2 books, I got like 200 rejections, a lot of rejections. And then I had started to submit my second book and was working on a third. So I was getting my work out there, trying to sell something for a profit. And we'll see in the court case, that's important that you are trying to make a profit. I was also entering contests for feedback. And if I went to a conference and they offered a paid critique, I would do that as well, because I wanted to make sure that I was progressing in my writing. And if you final in a contest, or if you win a contest, it shows that you are making strides in the craft of writing and getting noticed by professionals that look at who finals and wins these contests to actually reach out and ask to submit your work. So I was doing all these things, and finally my CPA said, okay, she's serious about this writing. She is acting like she's a business. Now, at that point on my 1040, he designated me as a writer of novels. So that's what I am today. I don't know why he adds of novels, but I am a writer of novels. But you don't have to wait. You can, if you have a day job as a teacher, put teacher/writer, manager/writer. You can claim on your 1040 to be a writer right now. The other thing I want to say here, when I put my author advice cap on, if you look over everything I just talked about, it costs what? Money. It costs money to go to a conference, to join a professional writing organization. It costs money to enter contests. So I tell anybody who's going to get a novel published, whether you are the publisher or whether you go traditional, you need to start saving money for your writing. It costs money to build a platform, to be a brand, to get the skills, to learn the publishing business. It takes money. And so I tell people, save that money now. And even when you're a published author, you will need money to put in to your book launches and to your marketing and so forth. Now, this was kind of my professional face here, but I also was keeping track of my expenses. So I had documentation that I was a writer. So I finally got smart, and on my computer was documenting my expenses according to the Schedule C. So that way, when I gave the information to my CPA, it would take him less time to do my taxes, and that would cost me less money. So I documented my expenses on my computer, and I update that when the expense would come in. I also kept a paper trail. So if I boosted an ad on Facebook and they sent me a receipt, I printed it off and I keep a paper file. Why do I do that? My only interaction with the IRS was several years ago, pre-computers and so forth. They zeroed out the contributions, charitable contributions that my husband and I had put on our tax form. They sent us a letter and said, prove it or you owe us this amount of money. And I said, how can they zero out my charitable contributions? Well, they can. So I sent them all the paperwork and I never heard from them again. So that's why I keep an electronic copy of my expenses and a paper copy. I also developed on my own, from advice at a writing conference, to develop a writing business plan. Now, my CPA did not tell me to do this. I was at a writing conference, and since I was over in the general market and I was a member of Romance Writers of America, I tended to meet a lot of romance authors. And one very well-known author said, I was talking about a writing business plan. She asked us what we put in there, and we all looked at one another and like, what is a writing business plan? So I developed a very basic writing business plan that shows who I am as an author and what I do. Because a lot of people think that all that writers do is sit in a corner and write. And they don't understand the breadth of what we do as writers, what we write, the supporting documentation to our novels, that we have to get out and promote our books and make appearances. There's a lot that they don't understand what we do. And so I developed a writing business plan, which we'll go over briefly in a bit. So I had a paper trail of my expenses. I have an electronic trail of my expenses. I have a writing business plan. And I also found out, because there's so many things that we do, and sometimes when you get on a computer, the time just evaporates. What I did, and you probably are getting these in the mail right now, is I take a day planner and I stick it right by my computer. and I document everything I do for my writing business. And early on, you can see, I'll show you these. Early on, mine were not that full. But as I got more and more into the writing business, they get full every day. There is something I'm noting, several things that I am doing for my writing business. So if someone would say, are you working on your business every day? I can show them my day planner. Now, certainly life happens and you might be traveling or might have an emergency and your business has to take a back seat. But I can show them that I'm making progress on my business every day. So I highly recommend a day planner, calendar, journal, something that you can show that you are working on your writing business. Because a lot of people have no idea how much an author is required to do today. Now, before we get into the IRS information that they are looking for, might want to wonder, where did Barb get all this information? Well, it comes from a tax case with a man named Herb Vest, Herbvest. This tax court ruling came down in 2016. So Herb Vest, his father committed suicide. He thought maybe it was a homicide. So he spent money investigating this death. He also said, you know, maybe this would make a great book or screenplay. So in 1 year, he did this investigation. He wrote some type of manuscript, which I find doing all this in a year rather rushed. And then he went and he wanted to take his expenses off of his taxes as a writing business. Now, he spent $6.4 million. Now, I know none of you out there are spending $6.4 million, or you shouldn't be, because if you are, the IRS will come to your door. But he said, hey, I spent all this money and I'm a writing business. The IRS said, no, you're not. You're a hobby. It went to the tax court and the tax court said, Mr. Vest, you are a hobby. And here's why. You are a hobby because you don't have good faith intention to make a profit. And they said, you do not have a business plan on how you are going to make a profit. Because he did not make any money, he just had all these expenses. They also, and this was key, said to him, you are a hobby, not a writing business, because you do not have the skill to write a book. He had not taken any writing courses. He had no background being an editor or a journalist or creative writing teacher. Not only did he not have the skill to write a book, they said, you don't know anything about publishing this book. And they said, you were basically bleeding money and you took no steps to rein in your expenses. So this was a landmark case on how to prove to the IRS that you are a writing business. You have to show a good faith intention to make a profit. You have to show that you have a business plan or an idea on how you're going to make your business profitable. You have to have the skills to write a book. You have to know about the publishing world. And if you're bleeding money, you have to show that you are being a good steward and reining in those expenses. And a lot of people will say you have to make a profit in 3 to 5 years, or you cannot take your expenses off your taxes. You can and not make a profit, but you have to prove to the IRS that you're a business. So that's why I have all this documentation to show the IRS that I'm serious. And the writing business, any arts today, it is difficult to make a profit. I'm just going to put that out there. It was interesting that the woman who wrote that very first article that I read many, many years ago about taking your expenses off as a writing business, I recently took a webinar from her about 4 months ago. And she told us it took her 9 years to make a profit. She was taking her expenses off for 9 years before she made a profit. And we're in a business where I got my first writing contract in 2015. So I started writing in 2009, probably took my taxes, my expenses off in 2011 or 2012. I didn't get a book contract till 2015. My debut novel came out at the end of 2016. The way that publishing works in payment, I did not see a dime from that debut release until spring of 2017. We have a slow business. A lot of times, if you don't get an advance and can budget that out, you are spending money on a book launch, and we all love our books, so we're going to spend money on a book launch. And we don't have any idea what money is going to come in the back end. So we might have to pull our reins in when we see what money is coming in. We also are in a business that's kind of antiquated. So if you have an advance, you don't have to worry about this as much because the back end with royalties is not your headache. But if you don't get an advance and you get paid on that first royalty, a lot of times a bookstore might buy 50 of your books. And this is kind of like the old commission sales. You get paid for the 50 sales, for the royalties on 50 sales. But down the road, if the bookstore says, I have 20 of these books that haven't sold, they don't mark them down and get rid of them. A lot of times they send them back to the publisher. Then the author is dinged for those 20 books coming back. That's taken off your income. And if you hadn't made money to cover that, that can put you in negative numbers. That can put you in the red. And publishers don't like too many authors being in the red with returns. So we're in a business where it is difficult at times to make money. So that's why a lot of people will say, well, you have to make a profit in 3 years. You may not, but you have to prove to the IRS that you are a business. And that goes to what this court case, Herb Vest, 2016, taught us about the IRS. They are looking, are you carrying out your writing in a business-like manner? And what do businesses have? They usually have a budget, they have a business plan, they keep track of their expenses. So ask yourself, am I carrying out my writing business in a business-like manner? How much time and effort are you putting into your writing? They want to know. So that's why I have my daily planner on my desk, and I keep track in my business plan of what I'm doing in my business. And here's the kicker that Herb Vest did not have. Do you have the skills necessary to be a successful business? Do you know about the craft of writing? Do you know about the publishing business? There is a lot to learn, and it is moving and shaking a lot of times. Things change. Can you make a profit now or in the future? With writing, a lot of times it's going to be in the future. You're working now for future gain. So that's the business we chose. Did you have a job in the past that involved writing? This would help you prove that you have the chops to be a writing business. If you were an editor somewhere, if you taught English, you taught creative writing, you have an MFA, that shows that you know what you're doing. Have you tried writing activities to make other writing activities to make money? And this is what we saw when we had the explosion of the internet and so forth. A lot of writers not only wrote, but they turned their expertise into another avenue income stream. So they might edit books. They might be a book coach. They might speak or teach. They might design covers. So writers can do a myriad of things to make money in their writing business. So that is what the IRS is looking for. So we're going to look just briefly at my writing business plan. Why do I have this? But basically, does it say? if you look at the writing business plan that I have, right off the back, it's showing that I am a professional. I list my professional organizations. I list what I do in them, whether I'm on the board or I'm helping judge a contest. I show that I'm an active member networking with other professionals. And this is just so important. If you listened to Cynthia earlier about this is a tough business and you need those people to come beside you and encourage you and remind yourself that we're doing kingdom work. Everywhere we go, we're shining a light for Jesus. And in my plan, it shows that I'm a professional writer, but I have an ulterior motive, and that is to get the word of God out there to shine a light for Christ in what I do and impact this world for Jesus. So it shows my professional writing organizations. It also shows professional groups that I meet with that aren't necessarily, formulated. So I meet with a critique group. Those are professionals. I judge contests. Do I do any jobs for my publisher? I happen to put out a loop email, so I'm networking with other authors. So it shows my professionalism. The other thing, and we don't think of this word with writing, it shows my supply chain of product. This goes to submitting your work. It shows what books I am trying to sell. It shows what book I am writing that I am trying to get out there. It shows if I'm going anywhere or doing research for a future project. So it basically shows what I intend to sell and what I'm working on to sell and make a profit. And a lot of times we write books, but we also write back cover blurb, we write pitches, we write proposals, we write synopses. So we write a lot of things other than just a manuscript. So that shows my supply chain of product to prove that I'm trying to make a profit. And then this whole bit of promotion, there's a lot on here about what I'm doing to promote myself as an author and what I'm doing to promote my books. And so I have on here any teaching opportunities that I'm involved in. If I do school visits, a lot of kidlit authors develop things they can teach at school, and they do visits and they get paid for them. And marketing is what you pay for. Publicity is free. So a lot of times if you're trying to reduce expenses, you can try and get publicity for free. And that can be a number of things, getting on somebody's blog. Sometimes if you're tied in with conferences or book events, you might get contacted and they might do an article about you. Doesn't cost you anything but time. That's wonderful. Publicity is wonderful. Marketing, you have to pay for. So I put down here what I do to market myself. My monthly newsletter used to be free. Now I pay monthly for it because I got more followers or subscribers to my newsletter. And then the postings on social media that I do, blog post, engagement, paid advertising if I pay to do an ad on BookBub or Amazon. And then I attend events. So I would list where I attended an event. I also keep track then of my submissions at the end, who I submitted my work to, do I have a contract? So this writing business plan is the overall look at my writing business. And it shows all avenues of what I'm participating in to be a professional, to make my book launches successful, to, even though we do this to shine a light, we would like to make our agents and publishers and editors happy by selling books and influencing the world. So that is my writing business plan. Now, briefly, I will go over, I also keep track of my expenses on the Schedule C. And you have a copy of that. You can add or subtract whatever you want to put on there. But there are a lot of expenses that go into running a writing business. First off is income. I get paid in 4 quarters. So I have my income listed quarterly. I list anything else I do that would generate income, teaching, speaking, editing, anything that's generating income. If I go to a book event, and this can get kind of timely, but if I go to a book event with several titles, I have to know the cost of each title and whether I make a profit or loss selling that book at a book event. And book events are handled differently, but if I go as the bookseller, I have to keep track of what I sell and the cost of my book. So I know from a book event whether I've had a profit or a loss. And you might say, well, Barb, why would you have a loss at a book event when you're selling books? I look at book events more as a marketing and promotion than actually selling. I don't like to get out there and just handle cash selling my books, but I do. But a lot of times I might have books that if I sell every book for $10, I'm making a profit on some. If I bought a few off Amazon to fill my display, I might lose a couple bucks on those books. And I have to balance that out at the end. So I look at more book events as more promotion than actually book selling. So I have to know if I made a profit or loss. And the other thing that really threw me, and it shouldn't have, because I used to work retail, is my accountant said to me, Barb, what's the cost of your inventory? I'm like, I have to know like how much inventory cost I have on hand? Like what's the cost of every book and how many books I have? Yes, I do. I keep track of my inventory. And sometimes that can be hard because I have to keep track of what I give away as a personal gift and what I have in inventory to sell. So that really threw me. My cost of goods, I had to know what my inventory, what the cost of that was. And if you think about it, it's a good thing because if I had a flood or heaven forbid, a house fire or something, and all my books burned up, that cost me and my business money. So the beginning of my expenses is all income. And then my cost of goods and how I figure out the cost of a book, what I bought it for, how many books, division, and so forth. And I have that on the form. And then I go into, if I purchased any books, the advertising. One of the reasons you have to know what the cost of your inventory is when I send a book to a blog winner or I donate a book, that's a cost to my business of that book. So I have to know like what Defending David, what the cost of that book is that I have on hand. My Christmas story, you know, what is the cost of that book on hand? Because if I donate them, that's a cost to me. And if I mail them out, not only do they have the cost of the book, but the cost of mailing. And when you do a book launch, I had 2 books launch pretty close together. My mailing expenses, I was mailing a whole bunch of books out. So the mailing expenses can go up too. When you send a book to a library or blogger, you got to know the cost because that's costing your business something. And then I go on in the expenses. If you go to a conference, it can be expensive. Virtual conferences are great. There is so much information on the web today that you can learn now about craft of writing a book, what agents and editors are looking for, how to do a proposal. There's so much information out there now that when I cut my teeth back in 2009, 2010, and all the way up, wasn't out there. So it's so good to have so much information and so much of it free and inexpensive. But if you go to a writing conference, and I encourage you because that's where you make the connections and meet people that you only know online, it does cost some money. And I went to the ACFW conference in August. Well, there's hotel costs and travel costs and conference costs, and you can take food off at 50%. Well, my husband used to say, you know, say I went to a conference and it cost me $1,500. He would say, how many books do you have to sell to make up that $1,500? A lot. And sometimes you're not going to sell that many books to make up for that expense. But if you have a plan that eventually you're going to make a profit, get close to breaking even, you're okay with the IRS. And then I just continue on. If you buy anything big, you'll notice here I bought a laptop one time specifically for my writing business. And that's what you have to ask yourself, is what I'm buying specifically for my writing business? I bought a laptop so that when I travel, I can be Barbara M. Britton. And so that was prorated over 3 years. So anything you buy specifically for your writing business, you have to take it off of your taxes for your business as an expense. If you copyright a book, that's going to cost you $65 through the Library of Congress. If you buy any craft or writing books, you can take those off. Dues and subscriptions, those are things like MailChimp. I got a check on Twitter, so I am a professional. I don't do my own graphics. I'm not that techie. So I have a BookBrush subscription for $96 a year. So all these expenses add up. So when people talk about platform and all this stuff you're doing, it costs money. And that's why I caution everybody going into writing to start saving money, because you're going to be expending money in ways that you didn't necessarily know. Having a domain name costs money. Having a website costs money. So just remember that when you go into writing. Yeah, so that is how I keep track of my expenses, so that I can show to my CPA, to the IRS, that I am a professional, that I have a writing business, that I know what I'm doing. Now, finally, in the beginning, I didn't. That's why I got 200 rejections. But I kept going. I kept writing the next book and the next book. And I did not sell my first book, my second book, my third book. I sold my fourth book and eventually went back and sold my second book. But it took me a long time to finally get a contract and break in to the publishing world. And it's a steady climb a lot of times, to build that business, to build that readership, to build that brand takes a lot of time and effort. But keep in mind, you can do it. Just make sure, like we talked about today, that you're doing your CPA and yourself a favor. You know the craft of writing, you have the skills, you have a good faith intention to make a profit, and you're documenting everything to show that you are a business and you show everything you do. And if you spend a lot of money and then when sales come in and they're not as good as you thought, you have a way to pivot and to show that you're responsive to eventually cutting expenses and making a profit one day. So I will open it up. Let's see what time it is. Well, we have, what, 12 minutes. See, two minutes under. But I will stop sharing my screen. I'm back. So I am happy to answer any questions. I hope your head isn't spinning. I know when we talk finances and IRS, it's not fun, but it's a way to protect yourself, and it's a way to be a professional. And so if the IRS does come, you have your ducks in a row.
Very good. Well, thank you, Barb. That was so much information there. I've been keeping track of some questions from the chat. So I'm going to start with those, and I see more are coming in. Laura was asking if she can claim Twitter on her taxes. I'm assuming she means, well, actually, she wrote T Writer. Laura, did you mean Twitter, or is there something called T Writer that I don't know about? I was assuming she meant like a professional paid Twitter account or the verified account, but I'm not sure what she means. So she might want to.
Twitter blue check, and I did that to show that I was a professional. And I will take that off my taxes because I only did it because I am a writing business. And if you notice what I share on Twitter, it's all about writing. It's all about books. It's all about my writing journey. I rarely will tell you what I'm having for dinner or show you where I'm going. It's all writing related. So if the IRS was to look at Barbara and Britton on Twitter, I'm sharing Steve Lobby, I'm sharing Edie Melson, I am talking about writing and the blogs I'm on that talk about writing and my books. So it's all professional. If I was just on there as Barb, and telling you where I'm going or what I did on vacation, that would be a problem. So, but my Twitter is all about writing information, books, very professional. So that's what I would say, but check with your CPA. But I plan to take my Twitter check off my expenses.
Okay, thank you. All right,
Yeah,
Julia.
it wasn't, I didn't mean to write Twitter. I meant because you said teacher, writer, which I am a teacher. So I deleted teacher, but left the T. So the question really was, can I still claim to be a writer, even though I haven't made a dime on any of my stories? That was the question. Sorry about that.
You on your 1040, I think they allow more than one occupation because let's face it, people have more than one job. You know, some people have 2 or 3 jobs. So you could put down teacher / writer. You're making income from your teaching job. You haven't made it as a writer yet, but you are a writer.
Thank you for clarifying that, Laura. I appreciate that. Julia was asking about claiming subscriptions to things like Microsoft Word, Grammarly, Pro Writing Aid, etc., as business expenses.
I would say if you bought it specifically for writing, like a lot of people write in Scrivener. So if like you bought Scrivener for your writing, and that's all you do on Scrivener, you can take it off, or any subscription that's specifically for your writing. That would be a writing business expense. You have to ask yourself, am I using this solely or specifically for my writing? Like we have a printer, I don't take my printer off because my whole family uses it. So but if I had a printer just for my writing and I guarded it like nobody could use it, then I would take that off my as a business expense. But since I use a general printer, I don't take that off.
Okay, that's a good guideline. Jacinta mentioned that when she used TurboTax, that she got a warning that said she had to make a profit by the 3rd year to continue to claim expenses. So, but are you saying that I don't actually have to, as long as I am meeting all the criteria you pointed out?
Right. So Diane, it was like 9 years. A lot of authors, it can take year upon year upon year just to break even or even make a profit. That's probably a warning on there for that hobby loss rule. As long as you can prove you are a business, there might be some way to override that. I don't use TurboTax. I go to a tax man, but there's probably a way to override that. But you have to prove, if they showed up and say, we want to have evidence that you're a business, you would have to produce like the writing business plan and be able to document and say why you're a business. And that goes back to that tax case, Herb Vest 2016, the precedent about showing that you're in good faith intention to make a profit, that you have the skill, that you know how to publish a book, that well, we're not bleeding 6.4 million, but that you have a writing business plan, that you have the documentation to prove it. Can you prove to the IRS? That's what I would say. And that's why, you know, if you don't have documentation or you don't have things in a professional manner, make sure that you start getting them together to show that you are a business.
And what year was that lawsuit? Did you say her best?
2016.
2016, good reference. And I would say, I mean, I'm not teaching this class, but my husband says the same thing, that, you know, no, we have all the documentation and you're a professional writer. It's more for the hobbyist. Like maybe when I was first getting started and I wasn't really intent on publishing, I was sort of playing around with it, or maybe published the first story. I really didn't know, but now I consider myself in my mind a professional writer as well, and the amount of time I put into it every day.
And I think
that's really good advice.
My CPA was a little worried about. He's like, okay, she has one book. Was this a hobby book? Is she going to continue to write? So I think that's what made him nervous. So then when book 2 came along and I was still doing this and submitting book 1, book 2, and I was working on book 3, then he's like, okay, we can prove that this is not just, you know, a hobby that she does occasionally. She is working at this and it's a job.
Right.
Let me tell you, it's work. She is working at this and she is serious about this. So yes, he felt comfortable.
Okay. Well, this is very convicting. I'm not going to speak to anybody else in here, but I have not, I mean, I save my receipts every year and I give them to my husband, but I'm being very convicted that I need to be more formal in the way I track everything. So I have all those pieces, but I don't have any really record of it, you know, so that's very helpful. Susan wanted to know regarding the point that you made about having maybe a job that's writing related or a degree or something in your past that was writing related. Like, what do you think, how long ago would it count? Like within a decade, longer, ever? Like, what
Yeah,
do
I
you
mean,
think would be valid?
if I had, you know, a bachelor degree in English, you know, or if, you know, certainly MFA, or if I was a teacher of creative writing and I could show that I had some experience and training in that, you know, I don't know if there's a you know, a date where that would expire, but that would at least show that you have some knowledge of how to craft a book. I mean, I was coming in blind, and that was probably another thing that made my CPA nervous. Is like, what does she know about writing? You know, is this book like even publishable? So I can see where he was a little nervous when I brought that up. And he eventually agreed when he saw that I was serious.
Yeah. Okay, what about, I have a question for Mary Beth about travel expenses. Can flights count if you're going to either a conference or maybe a reader event or something like that? I would think so.
Yes.
Mileage
Yeah.
and all that would count, right?
When, I mean, I've flown to ACFW conferences in Dallas, and I think we drove for Nashville, but yes, I've flown for conferences and taken those expenses off. Those are travel expenses. If you drive to an event, what is it this year? 0.585, and that might even go up. If you drive a significant way and you get, you know, 0.585 cents per mile, that's almost more than a plane ticket sometimes. So yes, a plane ticket would count for travel.
Okay. Casey wanted to know if you have a business license or if you need a business license.
I am a sole proprietorship, so I don't have a business license. That might go state to state, but I'm not an LLC. I'm a sole proprietorship. That's why I do the Schedule C on my taxes.
Okay. I'm going to write that down because we've been talking about that in our house.
You know, and some people, and you have to make this decision. As I said, I'm not a tax
right.
official, so you have to talk to your CPA. LLC will cost you money. There's documentation that you have to submit to the state for your LLC, and it's more than a writing business plan. I think they want mission statements and things. You really have to prove it, and then they usually want different monetary things, maybe more payments through the year, whatever. So that's a whole thing in itself. A lot of people do that because they don't want to get sued, or they think a lawsuit might come. It's very rare to get sued for slander or so forth. So I'm a sole ownership. I'm taking that risk. I also have liability insurance, just we generally do. So I feel very confident that you know, with what I write, I'm not writing a memoir where I might trash someone's reputation. So you have to be kind of mindful about what you're writing. But the chances that you are going to get sued are very minimal because you are writing fiction. But you have to make that decision on your own with your CPA.
Barb is speaking to us today just as an experience as a writer who has set up business plan to show that she's a professional writer. She's not giving us tax
Yes, as I said, that's
not
why
a
I hired
CPA.
the CPA,
Right,
you
right,
know,
right.
and I talked to my son who was an attorney, and that's when he said, you know, Mom, it would be very rare that someone
Yeah.
could even prove this, you know, so.
Well, we're at the end of our time. There's a couple more questions in here we didn't get to, but sorry about that. I know Hallie will probably be cutting us off. She's listening, probably, our tech person. Our
Well, thank you
wonderful
all
tech
for
person,
being
but
here.
thank you so much.
I sure appreciate it.
Yes, and I'm just going to take a quick second until she cuts me off to say a quick prayer for Barb, who's heading out of town for a family funeral. So let's just send her off in prayer.
Thank you.
Lord, just be with Barb as she travels today. Give her traveling mercies and help her to be a comfort to those who are suffering, and be a comfort to her as well, and all those who knew and loved this family member. Thank you that she was able to participate today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Kelly. I sure appreciate that.
You're welcome.
So,
You're welcome. All right, guys. I hope that some of you will take advantage of the social hour. I think faculty breakouts are first. And that'll be a great time to be just randomly dropped in. You can't request, but you'll be randomly dropped in with a faculty member and have about 25 minutes or maybe 20 before they're going to switch you again. So I hope you'll check that out. And it was wonderful seeing you, and thank you again.
you too, Kelly.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
It was
you.
well done.
Thank you. See, all my Wisconsin contingents.
There you
here.
go. They
Woo!
showed up. Oh, hi, Laura.
Thank you, ladies.
I'll
Yeah,
see you
there's
earlier.
Laura. Yeah.
Yeah, very good.
So,
All right.
have a
Bye.
blessed weekend.
Thank you. Bye-bye.